So welcome to Kermode Uncut, where we're rounding up my best and worst films of the year. We've done my top 10 best films of the year, and we've done numbers 10 to 6 of my worst films of the year. Here are number 5 to 1 of the worst of the year so far.
Paris, please, open up!
I can't do that, but I can't. Infection.
And at number 5, and it gives me no pleasure to say this at all, Alien Covenant. Ridley Scott changed the face of science fiction with Alien and Blade Runner, and now he seems intent upon plundering the latter to undo the legacy of the former. The Alien prequels are doing nobody any favours. The joy of Alien was that it was ruthless, it was stripped down. We didn't know where the xenomorph came from. We didn't know what its history was. It was that sense of mystery that really captivated us. Now it's just ooga booga backstory and plot explanation, piece after piece after piece that does not fit together. Apparently we still have more movies to go before we get to Alien. How bad was it? Well, around the same time that I saw Alien Covenant, I saw the Alien ripoff Life, and I thought Life was more original than Covenant. How's that for messed up?
You felt it, didn't you? The power.
It was Vortigern who murdered your father. But what you didn't account for is what you can do with this sword.
On to number 4, and at number 4, King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, or as I like to call it, King Arthur Daily, He's All Right, Legend of the Sword. You know, I wasn't crying out to see what Guy Ritchie could do with the story of King Arthur, particularly not with Charlie Humdrum in the lead role. However, what we get is Lock, Stock comes to Merry Londinium. Standout scene when David Beckham tells Charlie Humdrum, put 10 fingers round a blunt end and give it a pull. Call blimey, don't you know, don't you know.
You are needed, sir, urgently.
You want to know, don't you, why they keep coming here?
So is this a kidnapping or her first Transformer experience?
It's both, really.
And sticking with an Arthurian theme, on to number 3, and Transformers The Last Knight. Yes, Transformers meets Arthurian legend. Now, this is not the worst Transformers movie. I mean, evidently not. It's only at number 3 in my worst of the year. The story is all over the place. It's incomprehensible. It makes no sense, despite the fact that Anthony Hopkins spends so much time explaining the plot. Anthony Hopkins has said that as far as he's concerned, Michael Bay is a genius. Of course he said that. If Michael Bay paid you the amount of money that he's paid to Anthony Hopkins, you'd say that Michael Bay was a genius too. So into the top 2 now, and at number 2, Rings. Look, back in the 1990s, when I was doing a piece from the Edinburgh Film Festival about Ringu, little did I think that 2 decades and umpteen sequels, remakes, reimaginings later, I'd be sitting here talking to you about Rings. Is it a sequel? Is it a reboot? Look, I've seen it and I don't really know, and I don't really care either. I went to see it at a public screening, and a couple of teenagers sat down in front of me, and I thought, oh God, they're going to be noisy, it's going to be terrible, they're going to spoil the film. It didn't happen at all. What happened was, they fell asleep. Literally, they fell asleep. For once, I was completely with the youth.
What was that?
Which brings me to the number 1 spot and my least favourite film of the year so far. A really nasty, tawdry little film that I actually want you to ignore, but it is the worst film I've seen so far this year. It's Wolves at the Door. Now, the fact of the matter is, we didn't need another Manson movie, and my heart is already heavy with the idea that Quentin Tarantino is currently working on a Manson project. But Wolves at the Door is so duplicitous, so shamefully embarrassed about its own subject matter and what it actually is or isn't. During the pre-production, it was said that it was going to be based on the Manson murders, but actually just inspired by them. They weren't going to use the names of Manson or any of the actual victims. So all the way through the film, people are referred to by their first names. And they take terrible liberties with the truth, because somehow the filmmakers imagined that the atrocities that occurred with the Manson murders weren't quite sexy enough for the film. But then at the end of the film, they just throw all that away and say, oh, these are all real things that happened. Here are some pictures of the actual victims, and here is a picture of Charles Manson. It was one of those films that made me feel genuinely unclean. I'm not enjoying having it as my least favourite film of the year. I think it is a horrible piece of work. I think it is morally repugnant. I think everybody involved in it should be ashamed of themselves. And I think that it's an indication of just what happens when people lose sight of what they're actually dealing with. We have enough Manson movies. We don't really need another one. But this, and I don't say this lightly, is the worst Manson film I have ever seen. And that is really saying something. So, just to recap, my worst films of 2017 so far, January through June. At number 10, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, The Long Haul. Number 9, Pirates of the Caribbean, Salazar's Revenge. Number 8, Slack Bay. At number 7, Mummy Make It Stop. At number 6, Chips. Into number 5, Alien Covenant. At number 4, King Arthur Daily Ease All Right, Legend of the Sword. At number 3, Transformers, The Last Night. Number 2, Rings. And at number 1, Wolves at the Door. So there we are, my worst films of the year so far. Now I have to confess that there have been many more great films this year than terrible movies. As I said, I really struggled to do my top 10 list because there were so many titles that were contenders. As far as the bottom 10 list is concerned, those pretty much were the real stinkers that I saw this year. But what have I missed? What have you loved? What have you hated? What have I overlooked? What should I put in there? Give me your top 10 best and worst films of the year so far, January through June.